The funeral flowers had barely wilted when the phone calls began. I was still learning the weight of an empty bed, still catching myself setting out 2 coffee cups each morning. 3 weeks after we buried Russell, I stood in my kitchen with a mug I couldn't drink from, listening to my son's voice on the line. "Mom, we need to talk about the house." No preamble. No asking how I'd slept, or if I was eating. Just straight to business, as if my grief were a meeting agenda item. Donald had that tone, sharp, efficient, the same one he'd used as a teenager when demanding gas money. But this time, he wasn't asking. He was telling. I reminded him there was no mortgage, though I'd never mentioned that to my children before. His laugh was short, dismissive. "Mom, please, we all know you're struggling. Dad's pension barely covers your medications." Outside the kitchen window, the garden Russell and I had tended for 23 years sat untended, weeds pushing through the herb bed. He wanted to talk about options, about moving me into my daughter's basement. I wanted to keep my home, and the last shred of control I had over my life. Darlene's basement. The same one that flooded every spring, where she stored broken furniture and holiday decorations she couldn't be bothered to sort. The same place she'd sent me to sleep last Thanksgiving, when she decided the real adults needed the upstairs bedrooms. They called it a solution. I called it exile. "She's excited about it," Donald went on, oblivious to the weight of what he was saying. "Think how much easier it'll be for everyone. You can help Kathleen when she's home from school. Do some cooking, maybe laundry." I closed my eyes, my hand tightening around the phone. He didn't hear the insult buried in his words. Or maybe he did, and simply didn't care. "And what exactly will you be doing, Donald?" I asked. "We'll handle the sale. Lisa's cousin already has a cash buyer lined up, quick closing, no realtor fees. You'll get a fair price." Fair. I could almost hear Russell's voice in my head, his quiet, warning tone whenever Donald's definition of fair tilted suspiciously in his own favor. "I need to think about it," I said flatly. "There's nothing to think about, Mom. The offer won't last forever." And then the line went dead. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after, staring at the still steaming mug of coffee. The house around me felt too quiet, the kind of silence that swallows sound rather than holds it. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked. A car door slammed. The world kept moving while mine felt like it had been tipped on its side. I walked into Russell's study. His scent still lingered there, faint aftershave, paper, the warm smell of old wood from the desk we'd found at an estate sale before Donald left for college. I opened the bottom drawer, the one I'd been avoiding since the funeral. Inside was the folder. Russell's handwriting covered the labels: bank, investments, property. The contents were meticulous, of course. Statements with balances far higher than my children had ever imagined, detailed records of dividends and interest, the deed to this house, and another, one I'd never seen before. A villa in Spain. Photographs slipped out from between the documents. Whitewashed walls, a terrace draped in bougainvillea, the Mediterranean stretching out in the distance. I could almost hear his voice: "A place where we can watch the sunsets, just us. No one asking for anything." I sat there for a long time, running my fingers over the images. Donald didn't know. Darlene didn't know. And, for now, they wouldn't. The next morning, I called Connie West. She'd been our attorney for over 20 years, a sharp, silver-haired woman who understood discretion. When I arrived at her office, she already had the relevant files laid out. "Russell was thorough," she said, sliding the papers toward me. "You are the sole owner of all properties. The children were never named as beneficiaries for any real estate. That was intentional." "And the villa?" I asked. "Paid in full. He arranged for it to be maintained year-round. You could live there tomorrow if you wanted." I thought about Donald's voice, so certain he knew what I needed. Darlene's silence since the funeral, her sudden agreement with her brother's plans. I'm guessing they've already promised the house to this buyer. Connie's mouth tightened. They can promise anything they want. Without your signature, nothing moves forward. For the first time in weeks, I felt the knot in my chest loosen. There's one more thing, she added, pulling a cream envelope from the top drawer. My name was written on it in Russell's careful script. He left instructions for me to give you this exactly 1 month after his passing. I broke the seal. Russell's voice seemed to fill the room as I read. Michelle, if you're holding this, I'm gone. And I suspect the children are circling, convinced they know what's best for you. They don't. You are not a burden. You are not a problem to solve. You are a capable woman who spent her life putting others first. Now it's your turn. Keep everything. Sell it all. Give it away. Whatever you choose, let it be for you, not for them. He had known. He'd seen it coming long before I had. Connie slid a small envelope across the desk next. Inside was a bank card. An account in your name only. He called it your Independence Fund. $50,000. He said it was for when you finally decided to live for yourself. The card felt heavy in my hand. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something other than grief. Possibility. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the folder and the letter, the photographs of Spain spread before me. I imagined the look on Donald's face when he realized the house wasn't his to sell. I imagined Darlene's polite shock when she learned her basement offer was unnecessary. I also imagined myself on that terrace, watching the sun dip into the sea, no phone ringing, no voices telling me what I needed to do. It was the first image that made me smile since the day Russell died. The next morning, I called Connie. I want the deed transferred fully into my name, I said. It already is, she reminded me gently. Then I suppose, I said, it's time I let my children know I won't be needing their help after all. I didn't call them right away. Let them wait. Let them stew in the assumption that I was sitting here, fretting over their plan, grateful for their guidance. Instead, I spent 2 days making my own arrangements. Quiet ones. I had the locks on the house changed. Cancelled the joint storage unit Darlene had insisted we share for holiday decorations and family heirlooms, in truth, a dumping ground for her unwanted furniture. I closed the credit line Donald had co-signed years ago, the one he'd forgotten he still used. On the 3rd morning, I dialed Donald's number. Mom, good, you've been thinking about the offer. I have, I said, cutting him off. And my answer is no. There was a pause. No. You can't just. I can, I said evenly. The house is mine. I'm not selling. He laughed, a short, incredulous sound. Mom, I know you're emotional right now. I am not emotional. I am clear. The house stays. I stay. I could hear him breathing through the phone, sharp and fast. Fine. But at least move in with Darlene for a while. No. I'll be staying right here. You're being unreasonable. Perhaps. But I've decided I prefer unreasonable to manipulated. And then I ended the call. An hour later, Darlene rang. Donald says you're refusing to cooperate. I thought we agreed. We didn't, I said. You're making this difficult, Mom. We're trying to help. You're trying to help yourselves. You've already lined up a buyer, haven't you? Silence. Then, it's a good deal for everyone. For you, maybe. Not for me. Mom. I hung up. That evening, my phone buzzed with a family group text. Donald, we're coming over tomorrow to talk this through in person. Darlene, yes. We can't let you make a mistake you'll regret. I didn't reply. The next afternoon, I set out tea and a plate of shortbread, more out of habit than hospitality. At precisely 3 o'clock, they arrived, Donald in his pressed shirt and pointed expression, Darlene with her polite smile that never reached her eyes. Mom, Donald began, taking a seat without waiting to be invited. We're concerned. I slid the folder across the table. You should be. Take a look. He frowned, flipping through the contents. Bank statements. Investment summaries. The deed. The villa. What is this? Darlene asked, leaning in. My finances, I said simply. Since you've both been speculating, I thought you should see the truth. There's no mortgage. No debt. I have more than enough to live on for the rest of my life. Donald's eyes narrowed. And you didn't think to tell us. I didn't think it was your business. That villa, Darlene started. Is mine, I finished. Fully paid. Maintained. And not for sale. They exchanged a glance, the kind siblings use when deciding on a united front. Mom, this changes nothing, Donald said finally. The point is, you shouldn't be alone in this big house. I'm not alone. I have friends. Neighbors. And I have plans. What plans? Darlene's voice was sharp now, the mask slipping. I smiled. That's for me to know. Donald pushed his chair back. You're making a mistake. We're trying to protect you. Protect me from what? From living my own life. I stood, gathering the papers back into the folder. The conversation is over. They left without touching the shortbread. That night, I called Connie. What would it take to transfer my mailing address to Spain? I asked. Just the flight, she said. Everything else can be handled remotely. Do you want me to start the process? Yes, I said. And book me a one-way ticket. Over the next week, I packed methodically. Clothing, personal papers, a few keepsakes Russell would have wanted me to take. The rest, furniture, dishes, linens, would remain. I arranged for Mrs. Rodriguez, our neighbor, to check on the garden until I decided whether to keep the house or rent it. On my final morning, I left 2 envelopes on the kitchen counter. One for Donald, one for Darlene. Inside, a single sheet of paper, the house is not for sale. I am not moving into your basement. I will be in Spain. Please do not contact me unless it's an emergency. At the airport, as I waited at the gate, my phone rang. Donald. Then Darlene. I let both calls go to voicemail. When the plane lifted from the runway, I looked out over the shrinking landscape, the patchwork of fields and roads, the ribbon of river cutting through. It was the view of someone leaving, not being left behind. Madrid was my first stop. The air was warm, the language familiar enough from my years of nursing to navigate without fear. From there, a short flight took me to Malaga, and then a taxi along the coast to Marbella. The villa was just as the photographs had promised, white walls gleaming in the sun, terracotta roof tiles, and that terrace, wide and welcoming, with the sea spread out like a secret only I now knew. Mrs. Rodriguez had stocked the kitchen, as Russell had arranged. Bread, olives, a bottle of deep red wine. I stood at the terrace railing, glass in hand, and watched the sun sink toward the horizon. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lift. Not just of grief, but of expectation, the constant, pressing sense that I owed someone something. Now, I owed nothing. The phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Darlene, we came by the house and saw your note. This is insane. Call us. I deleted it. Then I turned off the phone and placed it in a drawer. The sky darkened, stars appearing one by one. Russell had been right, it was a place where no one could ask for anything. And that night, with the windows open to the sea breeze, I slept without dreams. I woke to the sound of swallows stitching the morning together, their wings flicking past the open shutters. The light here was different, softer somehow, the kind that didn't accuse. I made coffee in the little mocha pot Russell had set aside for me in a labeled cabinet, cafe, his tidy block letters still on the masking tape. He'd prepared this place as if we would arrive the same day. I ran my fingers over the note he'd left inside the drawer. Remember to sit down. You always forget to sit down. So I sat on the terrace with my cup and a slice of buttered bread, watching the sea breathe in and out. A woman swept the street below, pausing to wave when she saw me. Later she appeared at the gate with a basket of lemons and a shy hello. Mrs. Rodriguez, the neighbor Russell mentioned. She showed me the garden beds, rosemary, thyme, tomatoes already staked, and pressed my hands in both of hers when I tried to thank her. You are home now, she said. Eat. Rest. Grieve. Then live. I spent the first days doing simple things. I laundered the linens that smelled faintly of dust and sunshine, opened every window, scrubbed the tile floors until they gleamed. Grief likes order. It sits more quietly when the surfaces shine. In the afternoons I walked to the market for olives and soft cheese, pears that bruised if you looked at them too hard. In the evenings I read the letters Russell had tucked among the books, small instructions disguised as love notes. There's a locksmith off the square if the gate sticks. The baker closes at 2 on Sundays. Don't forget to ask for the sardines when the boats come in. On the 5th day, the gate clicked. I stepped outside to find a cardboard parcel on the stoop, thin and official. Connie's seal on the corner. Inside, a stack of documents and a letter, all affairs transferred, utilities redirected, property taxes prepaid for the year. She wrote like a woman who had carried other women through storms. At the bottom, a small line, if they arrive, call me. I will handle it. They arrived a week later. I was deadheading the geraniums when a car door slammed at the curb. Donald's voice found me first, that clipped tempo he used for getting his way. Mother, he called as if I'd simply stepped into another room without answering him. Darlene followed half a step behind, sunglasses perched like a shield. They looked smaller than I remembered, travel-scruffed and impatient, as out of place as suits at a picnic. What are you doing here? I asked, surprised to hear my voice steady. Donald spread his hands. We were worried. You vanished. No forwarding address. No plan. I left a note. A note isn't a plan, Darlene said, peering past me at the courtyard. Is this where you plan to, hide? I plan to live, I said. Would you like tea? They followed me inside as if they owned the air. Donald took in the tiled stairs, the cool rooms with their white walls, calculating. Darlene touched a bowl of lemons, then wiped her fingers on her dress as if the fruit might stain her. I set cups on the table and waited. Let them show themselves. Donald began. We spoke with an advisor. There are tax implications, Mother. International residency, asset declarations. We should consolidate everything back home and list this place as an investment. It's safer. Safer for whom? I asked. For you, he said, too quickly. And if you insist on staying a while, fine, but we need power of attorney to handle affairs you clearly aren't in the state of mind to manage. Darlene lifted her cup, eyes sliding to the envelope he set between us. We drew up the paperwork so you don't have to worry. Sign and we'll make it easy. I looked at their faces, those features I'd memorized when they were warm in my arms and smelled of milk and the outdoors. I thought of Christmas mornings, scraped knees, the endless casseroles carried to school events. I waited for the ache to come, the one that makes a mother bend herself into a shape that fits the room her children have made. It didn't. No, I said. Darlene blinked, as if I'd mispronounced a word. Mom. No, I repeated. I will not sign anything. Connie has the authority to act if I'm unable. I am not unable. Connie. Donald's mouth tightened. She works for the family. She works for me, I said. And she advised me to call her if you arrived. He laughed, a rough sound. You can't cut us out, Mother. I'm not cutting you out, I said. I am stepping out. There's a difference. Darlene leaned forward, lowering her voice the way she did when she wanted to sound kind. We're your children. We know what's best. I stood and walked to the sink, rinsing the spoon that had stirred my tea. I took my time drying it, set it back in the drawer where it belonged. When I turned, they were watching me as if my slowness were a trick. What's best, I said, is that you both learn to manage your lives without rearranging mine. We flew across an ocean, Donald said, standing. We are not leaving without what we came for. Then you will be disappointed, I said, and reached for the bell on the counter. 2 brief chimes. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared in the archway before the echo faded. She doesn't move quickly, but she moves with purpose. Behind her, a man I'd seen sweeping the square lifted a hand in greeting. Another neighbor lingered at the gate. Word travels on quiet streets. Donald looked from face to face. What is this? This, I said, is community. You were concerned that I would be alone. I am not. Darlene's smile flattened. We'll return tomorrow, she said. Perhaps you'll be more reasonable. Tomorrow I'll be at the market, I said. The day after, at church. The day after that, in the garden. If you choose to stay in town, the inn by the harbor has clean sheets. They left with the envelope still on the table. I watched from the terrace as their car turned the corner, its impatience raising a little cloud of dust. That night, I wrote letters. One to Connie, brief and factual, they tried. I refused. Please note the encounter. One to Donald and Darlene, longer, I am safe. I am at peace. I ask for time. Do not force this into a war. The next week was quiet in the way only a place with dependable habits can be. I learned the bakery woman's name, Anna, and that she set aside the heel of the country loaf because she liked the way the crust cracked under butter. I learned which stall at the market sold figs so ripe you had to eat them leaning over the sink. I learned to nap in the heat of afternoon without guilt. I even learned to swim again, the water leaving salt in my hair and a clean tiredness in my bones that felt like child's play. On Sunday, I wore a simple dress and sat near the back of the stone church. I don't pretend to be holier than I am, but I like rooms where people gather to speak softly about forgiveness. The priest's homily was about pruning, how you cut what looks healthy to give the whole tree strength. I thought of the garden. I thought of my children. I prayed for all of us. They came once more, late afternoon, when the shadows on the terrace were long and kind. Darlene spoke first, her voice bright and brittle. We've decided to support your choice to take time, she said. But you have obligations, Mother. Birthdays. Tuition. The grandchild's recital. We need access to the accounts for efficiency. Donald set a new set of papers on the table, thinner this time. Limited authority, he said. Just for household expenses and family needs. I slid the papers back. No. Something in him snapped then. After everything we've done for you. I held up a hand. What you have done is ask. And ask again. What you have not done is listen. We sat with that. The evening birds went about their business. A stray cat slipped beneath the bougainvillea, tail low, on an errand of its own. I am not punishing you, I said finally. I am choosing myself. For the first time in a very long time. Darlene stared at the lemon bowl. And us? You are adults, I said. You will be fine. They left without argument. No slammed doors, no parting shots, just the dull thud of feet that carried the shape of a loss they didn't yet know how to name. When they were gone, I brought in the laundry from the line. I folded the towels still warm from the sun and stacked them in the cupboard, smooth and square. Then I poured a glass of the cheap table wine Anna had insisted I try, for cooking, she'd told me, but I liked the way it refused to pretend it was anything more. I carried it to the terrace and sat where the light lingered last. The sea neither judged nor forgave. It simply kept time, a wide metronome reminding me that days can be ordinary and still be holy. The phone remained in its drawer. I would open it again, I knew. There would be grandchildren to write to, holidays to negotiate, small steps across a bridge I refused to burn. But not yet. Tonight I would eat a peach over the sink and let the juice run down my wrist. I would read Russell's note again, remember to sit down, and I would obey. I am sitting down now. And I am not moving. I kept a small calendar by the kitchen door and began to mark the days. Not to count anything down, but to see the shape of a life I chose. Mondays for the market, Tuesdays for laundry, Wednesdays for swimming before the sun burned high, Thursdays for the church pantry where I folded donated clothes and learned the names of people who didn't apologize for needing help. On Fridays, I took the bus along the coast and walked back with sand in my shoes. I slept without pills. I ate when I was hungry. I cried when I needed to, at the sink or in the garden or kneeling by the bed with the window open to the sea. No one told me I was being dramatic. No one told me what came next. Mrs. Rodriguez introduced me to her niece, Carmen, who taught English at the school. You were a nurse, she said, eyes bright. We have a grandmother who needs someone gentle to sit with her in the afternoons. And maybe, when you are ready, you could help the older students practice conversation. The word practice pleased me. It implied effort rather than performance. I said yes to the afternoons, not yet to the classroom. One promise at a time. The grandmother's name was Pilar. Her bones were light as a bird's under my hands, but her mind was sharp. She liked her tea with lemon and the radio low. She told me stories about the town before the hotels arrived, about a husband lost to the sea who still visited her in dreams with an armful of wet rope and a grin that made her scold him for tracking sand across the floor. I told her about Ohio winters and gardens that sleep beneath snow. We sat together well. Grief recognizes its own. 2 weeks passed before I opened the drawer and turned on my phone. Messages bloomed like mold, missed calls from Donald, 2 from Darlene, 1 from a number I didn't recognize that made my heart jump before I pressed play. Kathleen. My granddaughter's voice, careful and quick, as if speaking without permission. Grandma, Mom says you're away. I wanted to hear your voice. I tried calling the house. I like the lemon cookies you made at Christmas. I can make them now. I hope you're okay. She hung up without leaving a number. Children learn the rules we do not speak. I played the message twice, then put the phone away. Love is not a summons, I told myself. But I wrote her a letter that night, addressed care of the school office where I knew it would be delivered by someone with sense. I told her about the swallows and the bakery heel and a neighbor cat with one torn ear who had decided the villa was his second home. I included the lemon cookie recipe in my careful, old-fashioned hand and asked nothing in return. In late afternoon, while the town folded itself into shade, a letter arrived from Connie. She had met with Donald and Darlene. They are recalibrating, she wrote, a lawyer's gentle way of saying that pressed advantage had turned into patience. Expect a quiet period. They will test the edges later. I made tea and sat with that sentence until the steam was gone. The edges came sooner than I expected. A week later, a clerk at the bank in town peered over her glasses with sincere concern. "Senora Lawson, a fax came from the United States this morning requesting statements for consolidation. It has your name. It does not have your signature." She slid the paper across the desk. "Power of attorney," typed in confident English. "My son's name." A notary stamp from a county I knew too well. I felt the old heat climb my neck, the one that used to make me speak too quickly, trying to be agreeable and stern at the same time. I set my palm on the paper like you might calm a restless animal. "Thank you for showing me," I said. "Please note that I do not authorize any release. If more arrive, call my attorney directly." I wrote Connie's number on the edge and we both initialed the margin. A small act, but I left the bank straighter than I went in. That evening, I took the bus to the harbor and watched the fishermen unload silver piles onto crushed ice. A boy with a face like the child Russell once was tried to sell me the day's smallest sardines at a discount. I paid full price and asked his name. "Diego," he said, stacking my fish as if building a house. "For frying," he added, serious as a priest. I cooked them crisp in oil and ate them with a squeeze of lemon and a glass of wine so humble it could only tell the truth. The house smelled of salt and clean heat. I thought, suddenly and without warning, of the first pot roast I burned as a new wife, and how Russell had lied that he liked it that way, chewing cheerfully on the edges and making a joke of the smoke alarm. The memory was like a door swinging open to a room I had not entered in years. I cried into a paper napkin and then I laughed until I hiccuped. Grief is a kitchen comedian when given space. A postcard arrived from Kathleen, blue ink, large letters. A sketch of a lemon in the corner that made me absurdly proud. "Grandma, I made the cookies. Mom said too much sugar." I said that's the point. "She is mad a lot. Do you have lemons where you are?" I wrote back at once. "Yes. Many lemons. A whole bowl." I sent a pressed bougainvillea petal taped to a note card and instructions for whipping the egg whites long enough to make the tops shine. I did not mention Spain. I did not mention anything her mother could use against either of us. We were beginning a conversation that did not require permission. On a Wednesday, I accepted Carmen's invitation to the classroom. 10 students, shoulders big with self-consciousness, faces lit by mischief whenever they could drag a joke across the language border. We talked about the difference between pain and ache, between alone and lonely. I taught them the important words: towel, receipt, kindness, boundary. I made them say boundary twice, then again, because it was a word I had learned late and did not want them to. After class, Carmen walked me to the square. "You carry yourself differently," she said, not as a compliment but as an observation. "I put something down," I answered. It was heavy for a long time and I didn't know I could set it on the floor. When I reached the villa, a suitcase sat at the gate. Darlene. Alone. No sunglasses this time, no armor of a brother next to her. She stood when she saw me, hands empty, mouth flat. "I came by myself," she said, as if I couldn't see that. "I thought maybe you'd talk to me if he wasn't here." I opened the gate and let her in. We sat at the table under the bougainvillea. I poured water, not tea. She looked sun-tired, her hair frizzing at the ends in a way that would have humiliated her at 20. At 42, she only tucked it behind her ear, a gesture that made my throat ache with affection I tried not to show. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "I'm here to ask a question." "Ask," I said. "What did we do," she whispered, "to make you leave like that?" The easy answers crowded my mouth: the basement, the buyer, the tone. I swallowed them. She was not asking for a list. She was asking for the first true thing I could say without turning it into a sermon. "You stopped seeing me," I said. "You saw a service. A resource. A solution. But not me." She stared at her hands. I thought I was taking care of you. You were taking control, I said gently. And you liked how it felt. She flinched, then nodded. He pushes, she admitted. Donald. He pushes and I follow because it's easier than arguing. It is easier, I said. Until it isn't. We sat in the soft hush of late afternoon. A bee nosed the lemons in the bowl and lifted away, uninterested in their clean, simple sting. Darlene took a breath that shuddered on the way out. I told Kathleen you were gone because you needed space, she said. She asked if it was because of me. Tell her it was because of me, I said. Because I needed space from everyone in order to hear my own thoughts again. Tell her I will write, which is true. Tell her I love her, which is truer still. Darlene nodded, eyes wet. He'll be angry I came, she said, half to herself. Then don't tell him, I replied. Keep one thing for yourself. Practice. She laughed, a small, startled sound, the first I'd heard from her that wasn't meant for an audience. You're different, she said. I am the same, I answered. I've just stopped explaining. She stayed an hour. We did not talk about money. We did not talk about papers. We washed the glasses together at the sink, passing the towel back and forth like some clumsy, shy acknowledgement of a truce. At the gate, she hesitated. Will you come back? She asked. I don't know, I said. But I will not disappear. After she left, I walked down to the water, sandals in hand. The sea was the precise color of the old blue mixing bowl I'd given her when she moved into her first apartment. I wondered if she still had it or if it had been left in that damp basement where everything I loved mildewed on principle. The thought should have hurt. Instead, it settled like a stone in the bottom of a clear glass, visible but no longer clouding the water. When I returned, a new letter waited by the door. Connie again. The notary stamp on Donald's fax had been invalid. Consider the edges tested, she wrote. They found them firm. I placed the letter with the others in the drawer labeled with Russell's hand, keep, and lit a candle on the table because night was coming and I liked to give the dark a soft place to land. Before bed, I wrote to Kathleen. I told her about the word boundary and how it can be kind if you hold it that way. I told her I had eaten a peach over the sink and thought of her, because she never minded the juice. I told her that when people ask for too much, it is not a sin to close your hand. Practice, I wrote, and underlined it once. Practice seeing people as they are. Practice seeing yourself. I signed it the way Russell used to sign notes he tucked under my tea mug, here. Still here. Donald came back on a Monday, as if a business week could force my life into his calendar. He didn't announce himself this time. The gate latch clicked and there he was on the terrace with a leather portfolio under his arm and the determined set to his jaw that used to precede schoolyard fights he swore he didn't start. Lisa had the sense not to come. Darlene, I knew, had warned him I was not the same woman he'd managed for years. He believed in pressure. I believed, finally, in air. You've made your point, he said, not bothering with hello. Now let's be practical. I am being practical, I answered. Tea? No, he opened the portfolio and slid out a sheaf of papers. 2 items. A limited power of attorney so I can steady things at home. And a letter instructing your bank to move certain assets into a more secure vehicle. It's routine. He laid them between us and I did not touch them. The sea threw light onto the table like a careless blessing. I read the first page without picking it up. English words dressed up in legal Spanish, a notary signature line left blank. He hadn't learned a thing from his last attempt. He only changed the stationery. Do you ever ask yourself why you are always in a hurry? I said. Because someone has to be. He tapped the papers. Sign, and we can be done with this performance. I rang the small bell by the sink. When Mrs. Rodriguez appeared, I asked her to bring our other guest. From the doorway stepped a tidy woman with a canvas briefcase and kind eyes. "This is Senora Vargas," I said. "My solicitor. She has a few papers of her own." He laughed then, short and sharp. "You hired a lawyer?" "Two," I said. "Connie at home. And Senora Vargas here." I turned to the solicitor. "Would you explain what you filed Friday?" "Of course," she said, in patient English. "We registered a declaration that any power of attorney issued by you is revoked unless executed in this office in my presence. We also notified local banks that no information may be released to third parties." Donald's ears went a shade darker. "Mother, this is unnecessary." "It's necessary to me." I slid another document from my folder. "This is a letter to your firm. It instructs them that any contact regarding my affairs must go through Connie. You don't need to be the middleman anymore." He didn't reach for it. He watched me with a look I remembered from the day I left him at kindergarten, torn between fury and fear. For a moment I saw the boy inside the suit, the one who kept his fists balled in his pockets so he wouldn't cry in front of the others. "Why are you doing this?" he asked finally, quieter than before. "Because I raised a son who confuses control with care," I said. "And because I let that confusion stand for too long." He drew a breath as if to argue, then let it go. "At least give me the house," he said, meaning the one with the maple by the kitchen window, the house where he'd tracked in mud and secrets. "If you're staying here, it's wasted." "It's not wasted," I said. "I've asked a local family to rent it. They have a baby. They love the garden. The piano will be played." "The piano is Darlene's." "The piano is mine," I said gently. "But I sent her the photograph of her recital. She may hang it wherever she likes." He stared at the papers again. "You think you're punishing us?" "I'm educating you," I said. "The lesson is simple: my life is mine." Silence opened between us. The swallows stitched it closed, darting and scolding. Mrs. Rodriguez set a plate of almonds by his elbow as if he were a neighbor who'd stopped by with good news. He didn't touch them. "Darlene came," he said at last, not looking at me. "She came here and didn't tell me." "She came to ask a question," I said. "She listened to the answer." He swallowed. It seemed to cost him something. "She said you were different." "I'm not different," I said. "I'm awake." He closed the portfolio. "Lisa thinks you're being influenced." "I am," I agreed. "By salt air and a woman who brings lemons to my door." There was no smile from him. Only calculation, then something like surrender. He stood. "I can't stop you." "You don't need to stop me," I said. "You need to stop yourself." He took one step toward the gate, then turned back, anger flaring. "If you cut us out, don't expect us at Christmas. Don't expect us at all." "I expect nothing," I said. "That's the point." After he left, Senora Vargas gathered the unsigned forms and slipped them into a folder labeled with my name. "You were calm," she said. "I practiced," I answered. "All spring." That night I wrote 2 letters. One to Connie, brief. He tried again. I refused. "Thank you." The other was longer, to Kathleen. I told her about the classroom where I was helping older students with conversation, about the boys who loved the word boundary because it sounded like a drumbeat when they said it together. I told her I hoped she was well and that the recipe for lemon cookies tastes even better when you zest the rind. I wrote that a person can love her family and still choose a separate chair. Days found their rhythm again. Laundry and market and Pilar's tea in the afternoon. I learned the names of 2 more cats. I learned where the wind came from by the smell it brought through the kitchen. I learned my own footsteps on tile. Then the letter came that would settle more than it stirred. Not from Donald or Darlene. From Lisa. Her handwriting was tidy and strained. She thanked me for the boxes I'd had delivered, then wrote 3 lines that felt like water set down to a thirsty mouth. We worried after Russell died and we reached for your money because it was easier than reaching for you. Donald is angry because he is ashamed. I am part of that shame. I am sorry. I read it twice, then folded it into the drawer with Russell's note, remember to sit down, because it belonged beside a tender instruction. When Darlene returned, she brought nothing but a sun hat and a small tin of tea. She sat without fuss and watched the light move across the floor. He thinks you're punishing us, she said. I'm protecting myself, I answered. She nodded. He doesn't know those are different things. We didn't discuss figures or deeds. We spoke of Kathleen instead, her hard first year, her quiet way of wanting. I asked if I might write again. Darlene said I should. Then she asked for a favor I would have refused a month earlier. If she came with me one day, she said, if we saved and planned and traveled in coach like ordinary people, would you let her see this life you've chosen? If she asks for it herself, I said. Yes. I poured more tea. There will be no secrets, Darlene. Not anymore. She looked relieved and scared at once, which is another way to say she looked like a mother. When she left, she kissed my cheek the way she used to when she was small and worried I would disappear if she blinked too long. Word of my boundaries had reached even the market stalls. The butcher, who pretended indifference to gossip, slid a better cut into my parcel with a shrug. For strength, he said. The baker hid an extra heel beneath the paper. For stubbornness, she whispered. I carried bread and meat and quiet pride down the hot street, and none of it was heavy. The last confrontation arrived without faces. Connie sent notice that Donald had withdrawn the request for statements. Senora Vargas confirmed no further faxes had arrived. There was a stillness in that, a truce made of absence. I took it as a mercy. Not every battle ends with trumpets. Some end with a closed drawer. On a Sunday evening, when the sea took on the color of old pewter and the air smelled of cooled stone, I wrote one more letter. This one I did not send. It was to Russell, and it began with the ordinary. I sat down. I watered the thyme. I learned how to ask for sardines properly. Then I told him the truth he'd once written to tell me, I am not a burden. I am not a problem to solve. I am a woman who knows what she owns and what she owes. For a long time, those were the same. They aren't now. I folded the letter and placed it beneath the little brass key with the Spanish flag. When I turned back to the terrace, the moon had laid a path of white across the water. I stood there, not on any calendar anyone else had drawn, and I let the air move through me. There would be other tests. I knew that. Birthdays and holidays and the slow politics of family memory. I would fail some of them. I would win more than I lost. But tonight the house held me the way a promise holds. The neighbors talked in low voices in the street. Somewhere, a radio played a song from long before any of us were born. I blew out the candle and went to bed in a room that smelled of lemon oil and salt. A mother still, but not an instrument. A widow, yes, but not hollow. A woman with a door she could lock and a life she could open. I began keeping a small ledger in the kitchen drawer, the one where Russell used to hide spare keys. Not of money, of promises. A promise to swim 3 times a week even when the water felt frank and cold. A promise to visit Pilar every afternoon except Sunday. A promise to write a letter each week to someone who had loved me without asking for proof. I listed names: Connie, Mrs. Rodriguez, the baker who saved me the heel. At the bottom I left a blank line for Kathleen, because love needs space to arrive. Pilar had a bad morning. Her breath came shallow and thin, and the nurse's aide who usually had jokes in her pockets arrived with worry instead. I brewed the tea stronger than usual, squeezed lemon into it, and held the cup so Pilar's hands could rest on mine. She told me a story about a blue dress she wore to a dance in 1958, how the hem caught on a splinter and her mother fixed it with 3 tiny stitches no one could see. "That's what I want," she said, tapping the table for emphasis, "problems mended so neatly they don't humiliate the fabric." I thought of my house with its locks changed and my name alone on the deed. I thought of Donald's forms, unsigned and tidy. Small stitches. No humiliation. On Thursday, Senora Vargas stopped by with a folder. "Routine," she said, and it was. She'd received confirmation from the registry here that my revocations were recorded. She smiled at the line that mattered to me: "The undersigned acts independently and with full capacity." I slid the paper into the drawer with Russell's letter. Full capacity. It felt like a garment I'd owned for years and finally learned to wear. That afternoon I planted a row of basil cuttings beside the thyme. The soil gave with a soft sigh. Mrs. Rodriguez leaned on the gate, approving. "You'll have pesto for an army," she said. "I don't want an army," I answered. "Just enough for the neighbors." She nodded as if that clarified me. The neighbors were already forming themselves into something like a chorus. Anna the baker taught me how to braid dough for a festival loaf. The butcher insisted I learn the names of the fish in both languages, so I wouldn't be cheated by the morning boats. There was an old man with a harmonica who played under the jacaranda and insisted every good day has a tune, and a boy who ran errands for coins and pride. When I paid him, I added 1 extra coin and said it was for his mother's patience. He held it up to the light and said, "Patience is worth more," which made all the adults laugh and made me ache, because it was true. A week later a letter arrived with a pale college crest in the corner. Kathleen. The handwriting was smaller than I expected, grown up but careful. She thanked me for the recipe and reported that her lemon cookies had cracked on top like the surface of a little lake in winter. She asked if I believed that a person could love 2 places at once. She did not mention her parents. She did not ask for money. I answered the same day, "Yes, you can love 2 places, and sometimes 3, your heart is not a jar with a lid." I told her about the basil and the boy with the coin and how salt air rusts anything that pretends to be stronger than it is. I signed with my old name, Grandma, and added my address only once, on the back of the envelope flap, so she would have to look for it. Darlene telephoned the next morning through Connie, as we had arranged. No surprise ambushes, no sudden flights. Polite as waltz steps. "He's quiet," she said, meaning Donald. "Lisa says the quiet is heavy." "Let it be heavy," I told her. "People build muscles that way." She laughed softly. "He wants to know if you'll keep the house. He says it's inefficient to own 2. "We are not a company," I said. "We are people. I will keep what I can tend." After a pause, she said, "He found your boxes of our childhood. He sat on the floor and went through every school picture. He didn't speak to anyone for an hour." I held the phone between shoulder and ear and pressed my thumb into a lemon until oil glazed my skin. "Pictures are a kind of mirror," I said. "Some days they flatter. Some days they accuse." In church on Sunday I lit 2 candles. One for Russell, as always. One for the mother I had been, the one who confused giving with disappearing. I don't believe candles change outcomes, but I believe they change rooms. The wax softened, the flame behaved itself. The priest spoke again of pruning, this time with the quiet ferocity of a man who had killed many branches to save his trees. Outside, Anna pressed a slice of almond cake into my hand as if I had done something brave. I ate it on the steps with a stubborn pleasure that felt like oxygen. News travels oddly in small places. I never told anyone about the attempted power of attorney, and yet the fishmonger winked and said, "Your son will learn to fish or he will go hungry." I didn't correct him. I bought sardines and 2 mackerel and walked home along the sea because repetition is a kind of prayer I can manage. One evening a knock came just as the sky went the color of weak tea. A stranger stood at the gate, hat in hand, with eyes like wet stones. "Forgive me," he said, and gave a name I did not recognize. "I am Russell's cousin's boy." He spoke haltingly, then faster when I motioned him in. He had grown up on stories of Russell's patience, the way he fixed things no one else could fix, the way he knew when not to speak. He was in Malaga on business, had passed the street by chance, and had argued with himself for 10 minutes at the corner before daring to knock. I made coffee and brought out the tin of biscuits I kept for company, which is how you make strangers confess. He told me his wife had left in April. He told me he hadn't cried because he grew up male and proud. He told me he'd seen my son once, years ago, all swagger and heat, and had thought, we are not made of the same fabric. I listened. When he left, he kissed the air beside my cheek, the way people do in places where love is stable enough to be casual, and I stood for a long time in the kitchen remembering how many versions of Russell were still walking around the world, disguised as other people. Kathleen's second letter was braver. She asked if I would mind if she wrote more often, but not to tell her mother yet. She confessed that she sometimes sat in the campus library pretending to study while really reading cookbooks and imagining the lives of the people whose hands had stained the pages. She included a crooked drawing of a lemon branch and asked how old I felt inside. I wrote back, "Write as often as you like." I told her inside I felt 41 when I woke and 70 when I went to bed, and most afternoons I felt 19 for exactly 8 minutes. I told her I keep a lemon on the table like a clock. Inevitably, a letter came with Donald's name. Not his hand. Lisa's again. She thanked me for the courtesy of lawyers. She said she hadn't known how grief could turn a room into a rehearsal for a fight no one wanted to win. She asked, plainly, to her credit, whether I would consider meeting on neutral ground at Christmas, no papers, no plans. "We will see," I wrote back. I have learned not to schedule tenderness. Autumn crept in softly. The nights acquired a seam of chill, the mornings, a sharper light. I took out Russell's sweater, the one I had folded too quickly after the funeral, and wore it on the terrace, sleeves pushed up, so the salt could write its little white lace on the cuffs. The basil went to seed. The boy with the coin brought me a paper packet and said, "For spring." He looked proud, as if he had invented seasons. On a Tuesday, Pilar squeezed my hand and said, "You are practicing being old the way other women practice music. Do not forget to perform." So I hosted a small supper under the bougainvillea. I invited Mrs. Rodriguez and Anna and the harmonica man and Carmen and a shy woman from the pantry who knew how to bone a fish so cleanly it looked untouched. We ate slowly. We let the conversation lean against the silence without breaking it. Near the end, I stood and said, "I am learning to keep what I love without locking it in a drawer." They nodded as if I'd recited a recipe they already knew. After the last plate was dried and put away, I walked the dark rooms and checked the windows like a habit that keeps your ancestors pleased. On the table I left a lemon for morning and beside it my little ledger of promises. I drew a line and added one more: if Kathleen asks, say yes to what is reasonable and no to what is not, and teach her the difference by living it. When I lay down, the house breathed with me. Somewhere beyond the wall, the sea worked on its endless problem with patience I'm trying to imitate. I closed my eyes and counted small stitches, the neat kind Pilar admired, until sleep came and I didn't have to be brave anymore. Elizabeth's casserole was still warm when I set it on the counter. Lasagna, with the faint, sweet scent of basil rising as the foil peeled back. It had been years since someone brought me food without expecting something in return. Years since kindness arrived unannounced at my door. We sat at the kitchen table, the one Donald and I had bought second-hand when we were first married. She placed her hands around her mug of tea, watching me the way a person does when they know there's more to a story than what you've told. I told her some of it, enough to explain the suitcases that had gone out my door earlier. She didn't ask for details. "I know what it's like," she said simply. "My sister stopped speaking to me after our father died. We haven't spoken in 20 years. I think, sometimes, you just stop being useful to people." The words settled heavily. I didn't know her story, but I felt the truth of it. We talked about gardens after that, her roses, my neglected flower beds, and by the time she left, I had an invitation to come by the next morning to see her dahlias. The night passed quietly. No calls from Jerry or Zoe. I knew the silence wouldn't last. And it didn't. At 9 the next morning, the landline rang, the one hardly anyone used except telemarketers and old friends who refused to text. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. "Mom, what's going on?" Zoe's voice, high and sharp. "Jerry says you've changed the locks. And you froze the card. Are you losing it?" "I'm not losing anything, Zoe. I'm keeping what's mine." Her gasp was audible. "Are you serious? You're going to ruin my wedding over some ridiculous principle?" "No," I said. "You ruined your own wedding when you decided I'd pay for it without asking." She started crying then, the kind of tears meant to sway me. I'd heard them before, over a failed exam in college, over rent she couldn't make, over a car that needed repairs. It had worked every time. Not now. When the call ended, I stood at the back door, looking toward Elizabeth's yard. She was there, tending to her flowers, and she waved. I waved back. The simple, steady rhythm of someone else's morning grounded me. Over the next week, I saw her nearly every day. We walked her garden, traded recipes, even drove to the farmer's market together. She didn't ask for explanations about Jerry or Zoe, and I didn't offer any. It was enough to have company without the weight of expectation. But Jerry didn't stay quiet. One evening, just as I was setting a roast chicken on the counter, his car pulled up. He didn't knock, just tried his key, and when it didn't turn, he pounded on the door. "You've lost your mind," he said when I opened it. "You're throwing away your family." "I'm keeping my dignity," I said. "If you can't respect that, then maybe you were never really here for me, just for what I could give you." His mouth tightened. "Don't expect us at Christmas." "I won't," I said, and closed the door. That night, I ate alone, the chicken still warm, the house peaceful. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. I set the table with the good china because I wanted there to be no confusion about what this was, a family holiday, not a trial. The house smelled of cinnamon and roast beef, the way it always had on Christmas. I lit the candles and placed a bowl of oranges in the center. Elizabeth had offered to come by early to help, but I told her no, I needed the ritual of doing it myself. I had slept well. I had written down what I would say. I had folded the letters and sealed the envelopes. They arrived late, the way people do when they hope to miss the hard part. Jerry came first, guarded, clean-shaven, Rebecca behind him with a brittle smile and a tin of fudge that looked store-bought. Zoe arrived a few minutes later, eyes already damp, her fiancé hanging back as if the air might bite. I greeted them calmly, took their coats, and pointed them to the living room. No one sat. We drifted around the tree like strangers in a gallery. "Dinner's ready," I said. "We'll eat first." I wanted us to have one honest meal before the argument I knew they'd bring to the table. The roast sliced beautifully, the potatoes were fluffy. Everyone complimented the food in the exact tone people use when they do not mean it. We passed dishes with careful hands and careful faces. I spoke about the neighbor's garden and a book I was reading. They spoke about weather and traffic and plans. Halfway through dessert, Jerry pushed his plate away. "Are we going to pretend nothing is wrong?" he asked. "No," I said, and stood. I went to the sideboard and brought back 3 envelopes tied with red ribbon. Their names were written in my hand. I laid them beside each plate. "These are my gifts," I said. "Please open them before you say anything else." Jerry ripped his ribbon. Zoe peeled hers as if the envelope might bruise. Rebecca watched him, then her eyes darted to my face. I sat, folded my hands, and waited. Inside were 4 pages. On the first, the credit card charges, itemized, with dates and amounts, highlighted in yellow. On the second, a notarized letter from my bank confirming the removal of authorized users and the closing of shared access. On the third, the new will summary, the house placed in trust to a literacy foundation upon my death, charitable bequests listed, the remainder divided equally only after any formal debts to me were satisfied under signed repayment agreements. On the 4th page, a short letter in my handwriting. It said, "I love you. I did not raise you to treat love like a debit card. This is my boundary. If you wish to remain in my life, you will do so as adults who respect me. If not, leave the key on the hall table and go." No one spoke for a long time. The clock in the hall counted something heavier than seconds. Finally, Jerry laughed. It wasn't a kind sound. "You're cutting us out," he said. "At Christmas." "I am telling the truth," I said. "At Christmas." Zoe's voice shook. "Mom, this hurts. You're humiliating us." "What humiliated us," I said gently, "was learning I paid for your wedding without being invited to the engagement dinner. What humiliated me was finding my refrigerator emptied by people who didn't say thank you. What humiliates all of us is pretending that kindness owes a balance." Zoe's fiancé looked at the floor. Jerry stood. "If you think I'm signing some repayment plan, you've lost it. I did not ask for signatures today," I said. "I asked for honesty." He pointed at the will summary. "You're giving the house away to strangers." "I'm giving it to children who need to read," I said. "To women who need a room for the night. To men who need someone to say no on their behalf until they learn to say it themselves." "Us," he said, hand flat on the table. "We are your family." "When you include me," I said, "we are." Zoe looked up. Her face was swollen with frightened feeling, the kind that comes from knowing a script has ended and no new one is ready. "I made mistakes," she whispered. "I panicked about money and I took the easy way. I'm sorry." She looked at her fiancé, then back at me. "I want you at my wedding. I want to make this right." "Then you will," I said. "You'll call the florist and the venue and you'll tell them you used a card that wasn't yours. You'll set up your own plan with them. You'll ask them for grace. Most people have some to spare." Jerry snorted. "And what, I'm supposed to crawl back and beg for?" "No," I said, and my voice was very calm. "You're supposed to leave your key on the table if you cannot behave like a son." Rebecca touched his sleeve. "Jerry," she whispered, warning in the way women warn men when they know a line is near. He shook her off and shoved his chair back. The chair didn't fall. I had set the felt pads well. He walked to the hall, took his key from his ring, and put it down. The sound was brighter than I expected. He didn't slam the door. He closed it, and the latch caught with a neat click. Rebecca followed him without looking at me. We sat in the kind of quiet that doesn't wound. Zoe's fiancé cleared his throat. "Ms. Whitaker," he said awkwardly, "I'm sorry. I didn't know the card was." "I appreciate you saying it," I told him. "Take care of her." He nodded as if I had handed him a task he knew how to complete. I stacked plates while Zoe wiped her eyes with a napkin I'd ironed that morning. When we had cleared the table, I walked to the living room and brought out a small tin. Inside were paper ornaments I had made years ago from old sheet music. I put one at the top of the tree. The air felt easier. Stay for tea, I said to Zoe. She shook her head. I should go, she said. But I want to come by on Tuesday. Alone. I'll bring a notebook. We can make a plan. Tuesday, then, I said. After they left, the house settled, not as a tired thing but as a creature satisfied to find itself whole. I put the leftovers away and washed the good china by hand, not because I had to but because the warm water and small motions steadied me. Around 8, there was a knock at the back door. Elizabeth stood there with a tin of her ginger cookies and 2 mugs. How did it go? She asked. We told the truth, I said. Some of us didn't like it. She smiled the way women do when they've learned that survival is a practice, not a moment. We ate a cookie in the quiet kitchen. She told me the church service had been lovely. I told her the roast had turned out. The candles burned down to cups of light. Before bed, I took the letters from the table and placed them in the drawer where I keep important things, Russell's old watch, a small stone Kathleen once pressed into my palm when she was 5, the wool summary. I added a new page, just 2 lines. Christmas list, keep the house mine while I live. Keep my heart mine always. I slept. No rehearsing, no defense, no draft of what I might say the next time. Morning came with ordinary light. I made oatmeal, buttered toast, and read the note Elizabeth had tucked beneath the tin. You did the right thing. If you need noise, come over, my nieces are here and nothing is quiet. If you need quiet, I'll send noise away. I didn't need either. I needed laundry and the small ceremony of sweeping the kitchen. I needed the cold air on my face while I took the trash out. I needed to feel the new lock working under my hand. On Tuesday, Zoe came at 10 with that spiral notebook and a pen that left a wet, determined line. We called the florist. We called the venue. We called the caterer. We said the words people fear, we cannot pay this as planned. We need to adjust. And each person, surprisingly, made room. By noon, the numbers matched reality, the wedding grew smaller and truer. Zoe looked at me across the table. I don't want to be like this, she said. I don't want to be the woman who uses her mother for parts. You aren't, I said. Not if you stop. She nodded, wrote something in her notebook, tore out the page, and handed it to me. It said, I will repay you $200 a month until the balance is gone. It also said, please come to the ceremony. Sit in the front row. Please. I will, I said. If you keep your promise. If you keep seeing me. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her grip was firmer than it used to be, and I loved her for it. Jerry didn't call. He didn't text. The key stayed on the hall table like a small honest moon. I let it be. Boundaries don't need announcements. They need doors that close and open when they should. That night, I walked next door with a plate of leftover cookies and sat with Elizabeth while carols played on the radio. We spoke about dahlias and deadheading and the way quiet friendships begin on porches and at back doors. When I came home, I turned off the tree lights and the house held me the way a well-made coat does, fitted, warmed where it must be, never tighter than I choose. This is what the end looked like, and the beginning, the same rooms, the same dishes, the same woman, only now she belongs to herself.